in addition to trauma, if they have experienced PTSD, also working with neurodivergent young adults, and that would be people who live with ADHD as well as autism. And so that's a little bit about my background. And again, as Sharon mentioned, I am going to talk about mental health. So I wanted to start with just giving a definition of what mental health is in America, or the United States of America, how it's identified, and some of the risk factors that lead to the decline in our mental health. So mental health is the state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. In short, live a meaningful life. So I just wanted to go back to abilities. And when we think of abilities, I want us to consider what we are capable of doing. Each person comes to the table with a different life experience and set of skills. So it's whether or not you realize what you're capable of doing. And so the factors that impact our mental health are society, which includes social and economic inequalities, discrimination, media, access to helpful technology, pop culture and government policies, environment, which includes our neighborhood and neighborhood safety, access to green spaces, food and nutrition, access to health care and housing, our community, and this includes our community relationships. So if we have a relationship with faith-based and spiritual communities, peers, and mentorship. Mentorship is for everyone. It should never end. Family, relationships with our spouse, our siblings, if there's trauma that occurred in our families like domestic violence or even community violence, and the mental health of our family members. And then the last factor would be just our individual makeup. So our genes, our race, our gender, our sexual orientation, and the established coping strategies that we've already identified or have been conditioned to use.
Okay, Tiffany, let me just stop you there. So you mentioned the society and also government. The government affects our mental health. Can you elaborate a little bit more like that? So are you saying that things like in our society, like racism, does that affect our mental health?
Exactly. So like in the first area, as far as like our society, racism, our racial inequities, the social economic inequities that we have in our community, access to good food in our communities. There's legislation that prevents certain things or certain businesses to come into certain neighborhoods. Police brutality and police activity, that also contributes to our mental wellness. You know, a common concern is the relationship that African Americans or people of color in general have with some of our policing organizations. So the PTSD imposed by that relationship, all of that can add to our mental wellness or health. Okay. And so I also wanted to share with you how the brain functions and break down just the 6 components of our brain. So our brain is broken down into 6 components or sections, which one is the frontal lobe, which helps us with our problem solving, creative thinking, personality, our temporal lobe, which houses our memory and feelings, our brain stem, which is our basic life functioning like breathing and heartbeat, our parietal lobe, which is visual functions, reading and understanding. That's where a lot of our comprehension takes place. Our occipital lobe, which manages our vision, and our cerebellum, that helps with our balance, coordination, and motor learning. So our brain controls our whole body, and I don't know if we always give it its flowers and its consideration. Like imperative that we have good brain health and that we're feeding our brains well.
Okay, let me stop you there. So, as you stated, the brain controls the entire body, and we must feed it well. So, what are some of the nutrients that help the brain, that will assist the brain so that we have a healthy brain to control our entire bodies?
So one that's like a go-to for me always is omega-3 and DHA. So that always helps with our brain health, making sure that it's functioning optimum, that we're in a place of able to learn and able to do. In addition to that, our B vitamins. Our B vitamins help our brains in multiple ways. Vitamin D, protein, all of those things contribute to our brain health. And then there's natural mood stabilizers that also increase our brain function or decrease the disruption to allow us to be ready and activated to do whatever we need to do. So like zinc. Zinc is a natural mood stabilizer, or a real popular one right now, ashwagandha. So that kind of helps us address maybe some of our anxious thinking, which occurs with many of us right now just due to living in 2023, moving into 2024 on the helm of so much civil unrest in our world, the divide and understanding over COVID-19. All of us are a little bit anxious as to what's next. And when we're thinking about that what's next, we're not always being present with what is. May help just kind of stabilize you to focus on what's going on right now.
What about vitamin D?
And so we all know that we're vitamin D deficient overall because we're not getting as much access to the sun as we should. And that's for many reasons. There's not a huge requirement for our life right now to go out and do things. We can do everything remote. We can work remote. We can shop remote. We can communicate with our friends remote. And through that, we're not getting, that interaction. It does add to our brain health. It allows us to take in information and process it. And so that's just to put it simply.
Thank you.
All right. And so what are emotions? Because the main reason I'm here is to talk about how to manage stress. Now, before we can manage stress, we have to understand what emotions are aiding our stress. So emotions are the psychological states created by our feelings, thoughts, physical changes, and actions. And so feelings are a very individualized experience. Our emotions are a product of our feelings. And so the example that I want to give is that I am afraid of large bugs. If there is a large bug in my home, it sends me over the top. I'm ready to move, instantly. I'm very scared. And some people may look at that fear like, what's going on with her? It's irrational. However, it is mine. I own it. And so that's just what it is. Now, the response that I have from those bugs is this emotional response of fear, being scared. I may yell, I may take cover, do all of those things. So our feelings are individualized experience. I feel scared as it relates to large bugs. But that emotion of fear, that's a shared experience. Just yell or something else. Having to turn on the lights, looking for something to kind of provide us comfort. Those are like a shared response to the fear that we may experience.
And just to add to that, regardless of how that fear really affects us, like the example you gave us, large bugs. Well, we all know that an insect more than likely isn't going to harm us, but that fear is real and it affects our heart rate and It can affect our blood pressure, and it can affect our overall health, regardless of what the reality is beyond that fear. So if that can persist, it can create health issues.
Sure.
So, my point is, it doesn't matter what the fear you have really is. It's the fact that you have it, and if you have it often, if it's chronic, what could happen?
Exactly. So we're going to play on this bug scenario. So unfortunately, very unfortunately, my next door neighbor was doing a lot in her home, and she was shaking our properties up. And so we had an influx of large bugs in my home. Mm-hmm. And so for that specific reason, I do not want a heart attack. Also, the transference of feelings. I have a small child. I don't want him to carry the fears that I have. I'm mindful of all of these things. So then I have to address my fear with reality. This fear is like a centimeter tall. I am about 64 inches. I should be able to handle this bug. And so, I had to take charge of that situation and kind of extinguish my fear with some reality. I can manage this. I can handle the situation. I have resources. There are exterminators. All of these things to help me not get such a rise out of my stress level, causing my blood pressure to go up, causing disruption in my life, where now I'm completely focused and engaged in this fear and not able to do other things that's required of me.
Right, and cause problems, that you don't want to do.
Mhm. Right, and so in that situation, there's many different ways that you can manage stress. There's breathing exercises that you can do, but one thing that quickly grounds me is reality. And so kind of getting a stronger understanding of what I'm presented with. Bugs are small. I know many people have much larger issues, but reality does help us in my fear is not irrational because I own it, but I have to face it with a realistic response and realistic tools that may be in front of me that I can use. Mm-hmm. And so I also wanted to share that there are 4 zones of emotions. And so we have the green ready zone. That's the best zone to be in, where we're active and we're capable of doing whatever it is that we need to do to live a meaningful life. We have our blue zone, which is sad and bored, and that's where we kind of move to this withdrawn phase. And we withdraw from things that we are interested in, not things that we were never engaged in, but things that we were not interested in. So that's like a depressive zone. And then we have that confused and cautious zone where anxiety lives. And that's the land of what if. What if this happened? What if that happens? And so one thing we do is we starve our fears and our anxieties, and we feed our possibilities. And so that's something that we have to work on through a cognitive behavior approach. And then that last zone is the red zone, which looks like anger and overjoyed, extreme love. When we say stuff like we're in love, that anger and love lives in that same red zone. And so love and hate are actually 2 modes with the same focus and concern. There are 2 circuits in our brain that are actually shared when feeling love and hate. And the circuits are the putamen and the insula. The putamen is identified with the feeling of protecting someone from getting hurt. The love, so we're protective of that thing that we love so much, or we're protecting ourselves from maybe some realities. And, we've all heard that saying, love is blind. And also preparing to go under attack, and that's that hate. So when we are enraged, when we see red, we throw all of the caution and our good judgment to the wind, and we go in. And so love and hate are very similar in that way of our response. And so We just need to be mindful of that lives in that same red zone. And so we're all, well, not all, many of us are fortunate to experience that full spectrum of emotions. No one is emotionally stable 100% of the time. If you were, then you're probably missing something or not paying attention to something. There are things that happen in our world that create a disturbance in our emotions. And so the goal is that we address it head on and we navigate our emotions, our feelings with care and understanding for ourselves, and with the hope that we can get through and this won't disrupt, our overall purpose on this planet or for our loved ones in our bodies. So for me personally, I don't seek balance. I think it's kind of reactive for me. I seek harmony. I have understanding that things will happen. Sometimes the bass is going to be loud. Sometimes the percussions are going to be present. So there are going to be all of these different things that happen in my day-to-day. I want to focus on what I can manage, but also create space to let the other things happen and know that I'll get through it. And so I'm always seeking a harmony.
So you said that you don't seek balance.
No.
That's interesting.
No.
I always thought that you needed balance. That was the goal, to, not go too far in any particular area and just, because life is filled with so many different aspects that we have to deal with. So I always saw it as more of a balancing act, more than an harmony,
And I think everybody will have their own. I live in my own world 100% of the time. Sometimes people invite me into theirs. Sometimes I invite people into mine. And so what helps me is the understanding of harmony. Some seek balance, and that is for them, and I appreciate that. However, for me, balance to me looks more reactive. And if I want to take control over or have control over my own existence, I'm going to look for harmony. So harmony for me means acceptance. So if this thing happens, I'm going to accept that happens, and I'm going to continue to move in a direction that I feel I'm guided to move in.
So how would you direct your clients? What would you tell them? What tips or what strategies to use to achieve harmony in their lives?
And so it all depends on what's going on with that individual. But one thing that I use often is reality and acceptance therapies. And so that is the idea that you're going to accept what is. And so, for instance, if I'm working with a couple and infidelity is what's going on, if we've already determined that you are committed to the relationship, no matter this occurrence, then we have to accept that part. We're accepting that part. We're not going down a what if field, a minefield, where what if this happens again, what if that happens again. We're at this place, and now we're going to build from this place. And so, that's the whole thing. We're going to continue the song. You don't stop a song because, a beat was too harsh or, someone made a mistake. You must keep going. You must continue to seek harmony. And so for me, it's always yes and. I'm going to accept what happened, and I'm going to do this to continue to move forward. With balance, to me, there's this need to constantly address what's wrong. And so sometimes we can do that. It really depends on what's going on. But sometimes I don't want to live in a deficit. If we're constantly focused on what's wrong and remedying that to recenter and create balance, then it's to me, a deficit-focused mindset. Where if we have a strengths-based mindset, we understand that this occurred, and we're going to move beyond it. This now is a part of my fabric. All right, the blemish exists. Let's keep moving.
Okay.
Okay. So where were we? And so we want to navigate through each zone without causing disruption to our lives. Now, I don't want to confuse disruption with a distraction or stagnation. There's a thing that happens, and we must be present for whatever's going on, but we don't want to focus on that disruption. That kind of speaks to this idea of harmony versus balance. And this is a tool that works for me and with my clients. If it's something that they haven't bought into or understand and they prefer to seek balance, that is fine. I think it's just different terminology that has somewhat of a general same meaning, but for me it has just a slightly different approach. And so my goal with my work is to help individuals identify the zone that they're in. And our zones change throughout the course of the day, throughout the course of our lives, but always try to get over to a place where you're ready to be active in your life and do the things that you're passionate about, the things that bring you joy, the things that provide meaning. So, life happens. Someone, died. I work with many grieving people. And so that's something that we want to honor and celebrate and create space to continue to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
So coping strategies. And so coping strategies are behaviors, thoughts, and emotions that you use to adjust to the changes that occur in your life. There are 5 types of coping strategies. And so we have problem-focused coping, emotional-focused coping, spiritual focused coping, social support focused coping, and meaning making coping. So all of these different coping strategy types, they have their pros and their cons. And so if we look at the first one, which was problem focused coping, a good way to use this strategy is asking for help, setting boundaries, managing your time, prioritizing things, creating a to-do list, removing yourself from an unhealthy thing that causes stress. A negative side of problem-focused coping could be the blame or shaming of others.
Yeah, that seems to be a big problem. A lot of us don't want to take responsibility, and we want to blame other people for our problems. And really, that's, I believe it creates more problems and more stress when we don't take responsibility, because we're not getting to the root of the problem so that we can solve it.
Exactly. And so always when we're shifting blame, the question that I ask the people I work with is, how is this serving you? Does this make you feel better? And so, like, if the answer is no, then maybe we have to take responsibility, because we can only control our own actions. We control our output. We can, and so in how we receive information, we kind of control our perspective as well. And so, but how people treat us, what people do around us, we don't have control over that. So the blame game and shaming doesn't always serve us well. So emotion-focused coping, that can be exercise, affirmations, meditation, having a warm bath. There are many self-care practices that would support that, including journaling. And so the negative side of emotion-focused coping can be emotional eating, self-medication like alcohol or substance use. Social support, that is another coping strategy type. And so with that, you can participate in a positive support group. In addition to that, identifying a hobby, connecting with a like-minded group of people who share that hobby. The negative side of that is unhealthy venting with no solution. So just kind of connecting with your own support group and kind of just laying it all out for them. So this is wrong, that is wrong, this is wrong. And possibly when that group of people or person share some anecdotal support. You're always ready to tell them why this is not going to work. And so that could be a negative use of your social support and be unhealthy. Also, like when we're committing to a lot of social drinking.
Oh yeah, and this time of year, a lot of people are going to parties and doing a lot of social drinking, and doesn't help.
Not at all. And so I had an experience where someone I knew stepped out in their relationship. And so the reason behind it was that they were dealing with something difficult in their lives, and they were coping through drinking. And we know when we drink, we kind of lose control and understanding of our abilities at times. And so there were blackout periods, but as a result, this person stepped out on their marriage. And so, we had to look at that coping strategy, like, did that serve you well? And, what happens if someone has a bad day, if someone, has something that goes wrong at work, what do we say? Let's go out for a drink. That's a coping strategy that's often used. Mm-hmm. There's another side to it. You say, let's go for a walk. We could do something different. And not to say that these coping strategies are bad ones. I try to stay away from the word bad, but more of like, is this a healthy one? Does this one serve you? And so, in where we are, I think all over the world, we have an emotional response in many areas as far as when it comes to food. Like, we celebrate with food. If you had a good day, you may have food as a part of your celebration. If you're not feeling well, they feelings. And so we have to look at that. Did that serve you well? If you have hypertension or diabetes, do you really need to be sitting down with a tub of ice cream? Not at all. Is that going to, make you feel better in the long run?
It's going to create more problems for you in the long run.
Right. And so we have, I don't have, there are negative sides to religious coping strategies, but I know that can create a lot of dialogue that I didn't know if we wanted to kind of dive into. And so meaning-making coping strategies. And so this is accepting that there is a deeper meaning to the occurrence, turning tragedy into triumph, having like an eternal optimism. The negative side to meaning-making coping strategies is being dismissive of your feelings. So when these bad things happen, you kind of internalize it like you deserved it. Or you have like a doomsday outlook on everything. Everything is going wrong and this is how it should be. And so we don't want to live in that space either.
It's like stinking thinking.
And so, as mentioned, these are the 5 different coping strategies. One that I use often with my clients are different mindfulness practices. So like, there's a gratitude meditation script that a few of my clients find very helpful. We do gratitude grounding and like census activities. So one that we do, and I've done with Sharon in the past at one of her retreats, is like 3 things that we're grateful that we see, smell, touch, taste, and feel. And so initially, even I remember an experience at the retreat, people were like, well, why are we doing this? This doesn't make much sense. But when they dived into it, it just gave them a different perspective of their now. It just made them more appreciative for their life experience, and I think overall it was a good experience. There are simple breathing exercises that you can do, and nothing too long and extended, something you can do wherever you are. So if you're having some anxious thoughts, it could be as simple as, breathe in possibilities, exhale and let go of the worry, and kind of repeat that until you feel better, or at least are in a better space to kind of discuss whatever is going on. A body scan. I am always good for turning on a nice sound bath healing video on YouTube. and doing a personal body scan for me. So just allowing that breath to go from the crown of my head all the way down to my feet, and repeat. I'll set a time, set a timer for this practice, and see where it takes me. But grounding ourselves, doing mindfulness, just kind of understanding what's going on with our breathing. I find with a lot of people that we're not always breathing. Sometimes you have to say, breathe. We're panting. We're taking very short breaths and not really understanding the power in therapy and just sound breathing.
Yeah, I've had my own experience with breathing exercises, and I've actually had my blood pressure taken, and it was elevated, and then did some breathing exercises for just a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes, and had my blood pressure taken immediately after, and it's gone back to normal. Just breathing, nothing but breathing. So, yeah, breathing is extremely important because a lot of us don't know how to breathe. We're not having deep cleansing breaths. Like Tiffany said, they're very short, and we're not getting what we need to get from the breathing. We're not getting the oxygen into our bodies and through our blood to keep us healthy.
Mhm. It's like, at the day at the beach. We all have had that experience, just laying on the beach. We've been breathing that salt air, and how healing and calming it is to our bodies. But going back to the blood pressure, I have hypertension. When I go to the doctor, I'm always kind of nervous that I'm going to have a high blood pressure read, even if it's been normal for my own reads at home. And so we think about what the doctors do if they care. And so you have a high reading. Sometimes the doctor said, we'll take it later. Let's talk. And so they're grounding you. They ask you how you're doing. They ask you simple things about your life to help bring you down. And that helps you breathe more easier. You may take some deep breaths. You take your blood pressure again and it's lower. And so, that's just a simple way of how they're helping you manage your anxiety without telling you that they're doing it.
And they also actually can add to your anxiety because there's a thing called white coat syndrome, which a lot of people suffer from. I mean, that people that don't even have any high blood pressure diagnosis, but once they get in front of the doctor with the white coat, the blood pressure is elevated, and it's a psychological thing. So, we have to work on it from that aspect as well.
Agreed. Well, that is what I had to share. I would love to hear how you guys are managing your stress, or, kind of take any questions or comments that you have.
So at this time, feel free to unmute yourself. And if you want to ask any questions or make any comments, or even if you want to share an experience that can help the rest of us on this topic of mental health, please do so now.
And I'm sorry, before we get into that, one thing that I always want to make clear with the people that I work with is that mental health is an art. It is not a science. It's based on a psychologist, a psychiatrist interpretation, your interpretation of your feelings, because it's all about what you're expressing, what you've shared, what you've talked through. And so many of our emotional disturbances, there's no blood work to support that. If there's a chemical imbalance, of course, but emotional disturbances aren't always detected through blood work. So it's really about engaging your client in meaningful conversation, being present for them, non-judgmental, having a curiosity around their culture and understanding, and then developing a plan to support that. I was sharing with Sharon earlier, just my own experience with counseling years ago, I guess at this point close to 10 years ago, and feeling, emotionally unstable and not having the responses that I was accustomed to having for different events, and seeking counseling, and just having someone be dismissive of what I was saying, and later finding out that what I was experiencing, yeah, I was having an emotional response, but I was also having a physical issue. So I had like a brain injury, which caused a portion of my temporal lobe to leak out of my brain, and so I was having a lot of emotional misfires. I knew that because I knew myself, and so like brain health is extremely important. It controls all parts of us, but in this work that I do, like it's most important that the person that you're working with is truly listening to you, and always has a good understanding of resources, and knows that they're not the master of everything, like tagging other people in to support you. But this work is truly an art and not a science. It's all built on the understanding that the client has of themselves. And so I always tell my people that they're the masters of themselves. They're just letting me in, and I'm just going to help them identify, a coping tool or strategy that'll support them as to wherever they want to go.
And let me just say that Tiffany Thornton does, she's a therapist, as we know, but she does counseling virtually or on the phone, so wherever you are, you can work with her if you choose to. She's going to give you her contact information. She has a website, and so if anyone wants to contact her to just get more information about counseling services, please do. Thank you. So, do we have any questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
With Tiffany, I went to one of your sessions, and you did something very simple that you wanted us to do at the session. And I think you gave us a card and to write something on the card and give it to that person. And I did it the day that you had that session, and I sent it to someone, and I really got a good response from that person. So I said, well, let me try this again with other people that I know, I haven't talked to in a long time, care about them. And I got another huge response, and I was like, I got to keep doing this.
Yeah, that was a great exercise.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Mike. And we don't always understand how important it is to acknowledge others, and gratitude, I think, creates more gratitude. So that person did something for you that they may have been aware of or not aware of. They're not always aware of the impact that we're not always aware of the impact that we have on each other's lives. And so by acknowledging them, it kind of validated, their life path. And then it also, you got some validation from sharing that with them, and it continues. And so, that's great to hear that, you took it one step further and shared that with other people, because it seems like the reciprocity of good feelings.
And we need as much of that as we can get.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mike. Do we have any other questions? Comments?
Yes, hello, ladies. Good evening.
How are you?
I'm good. This is Carol, Lucille, and I just, as I listened to you, Tiffany, when you're talking about the fear of the bugs, I have a fear like that of dogs. And I've never been bitten or anything, but there was a bad dog on the block growing up, and I have a fear of dogs. And recently I had a bad fall because of trying to get away from a dog. Now my daughter has a little dog that I walk. I'm not afraid of that dog, but I'm afraid of big dogs, and a big dog got out after us. And one of the things, I don't know, for myself, like sometimes I beat myself up over it, but like I just wish that I could find a way to not, react the way I react, because I become a blooming idiot. And so, people have said, well, it's not that it's irrational. It's for real. If that dog is coming towards you, but yeah, no, I don't know. It's just an issue.
Yeah. So you said that you've had this experience since a child, and so
Mm-hmm.
like we have to kind of look back at those past traumas, because those past traumas inform our current being. And so what about what happened then? Like you said you weren't bit, but what happened then that kind of created this fear of dogs that stayed with you?
Well, there was a bad dog on the block, and it was two dogs that looked alike by the same owner. And so you never knew which dog might be the one. And so if it was the bad one, then he would come after you. And so that dog was between me and the junior high school. And so if I was walking with a group of people and everything, I was okay. I guess there's security in numbers. And if I was by myself, there were days where I became paralyzed. I couldn't get past that point. I would go back home, and hopefully my father was still home and he would drive me. And if not, I had to walk way out of the way to go around several other blocks to get to school.
And so if we were in session, and I'll ask, but you don't have to answer, I would ask, like, so you said this owner had 3 dogs. They had 2 good dogs, one quite good dog. And so what did that owner do to ensure that that dog that had, this kind of, the bad dog kind of stayed out of the way of children? Or, kind of, like, what did that owner do to manage that dog?
I can't even tell you. And it was not, and I'll tell you, this dog terrorized the block. So my aunt and the lady next door to her, when they would have to walk to the corner to get the bus, and so there was one other neighbor, a male neighbor, who would try and wait for them in the morning so they could walk together. And he kept a stick under the bushes, so if the dog got out, he was not afraid of the dog, and he had his stick. And so recently I have a podcast too here on the network, and my cousin was on the podcast, and she's afraid of the dog too, and she has like similar fear of dogs.
Yeah, and so
and what the owner did, I can't tell you. Yeah.
And so for me, it would be more of like, dogs are dogs. They're not just dogs, but dogs have owners. Domesticated dogs have owners. So why was this owner allowing this dog to kind of, create this emotional disturbance, not only with you, but with the neighborhood? And so to give you some more about the bug, it wasn't that, I just was afraid of bugs. My mother was extremely afraid of bugs. And so it was a conditioning that I inherited, because I saw how she responded to bugs. So I was like, man, this is my superhero. She can do anything. If these bugs can take her out, then they can take me out too. So I had this fear built on how I was raised in her understanding, of those bugs. And not until, 42 years of age have I somewhat addressed it? I still don't like them. I don't want to be around them, but now I can talk myself into a space of like, look, it's not going to be me or this bug. I'm going to take this bug out. And so, like, looking back at your situation, I'm thinking, wow, like, how could this person create this level of disturbance in the community? Because you weren't the only one. So moving forward, there's a lack of trust for owners who will manage their dogs well. Dogs just having good behavior and respecting humans in their presence. That trust was violated in that experience.
So what can she do about that? She can't control owners.
Right, and so like that would be something that you could talk about further, in an individual session and identify strategies to manage that fear.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the fact that the owner, he was, I guess, in my eyes, he was always an older man. And if he was outside, then I could walk past. I wasn't afraid if he was outside because he had control over the dog. And that family has always had big, bad dogs. But that particular dog was, he was just a terror. And it's now growing up on the block, it was close-knit, everybody. So I wonder that it's, I guess, did anybody ever say anything to him about his dog? I do not know. That's a good question.
Interesting. So maybe, people on the block were conditioned to experience fear from that particular dog, from that household. Like you said, if someone communicated to this person, this older man, hey, your dog is, like he's very aggressive with the children or people when they walk past. What can you do to manage this dog better? But like that fear was kind of inherited and passed along. That's the big dog. All right, look out. Here comes that big bad dog. Oh, well, we know when the big bad dog is out and Mr. Whomever's in the house, we have to go the other way. It was a shared understanding.
Yeah. Kind of crazy, right?
Life. It happens to us.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments or experiences we want to share? We got a few more minutes here.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Sharon. Hi, Tiffany.
Hi.
First and foremost, before I even get into my comments and questions, I have to say I am so proud of you, Tiffany. So keep up the good work. And one of the things I want to say, I've noticed as I've gotten older, and I won't bother to say the age, but I realize that life, of course, is getting shorter and shorter. I'm going on the downside now. I'm not going up anymore. And I realize that there have been so many people in my life that have affected me in such positive ways, or that each season that we have, God puts a person in there for a reason. And they might not even be there for maybe a month, a year, 2 years, and then they're gone out of your life. But that person has brought something to you. And I realized what I've been doing, and it sounds kind of silly in a way, but it makes me feel better. And I think it makes the people feel better too, is that I've started acknowledging what people have done. Like I called a friend of mine that I hadn't seen or talked to in, oh my gosh, a good maybe 30, 35 years. And that's one thing COVID did for us. It did bring us closer to friends again. And when I was talking to her, I said, I don't think I ever told you how much you influenced me, how you helped me come out of the shell that I was in. And she said, what? And I said, I said, remember, because at one point I dressed a certain way. Like I said, I wouldn't wear pants when everybody was wearing pants, and she got me into wearing pants and, going to parties and being more social than I was before. And I said, but that made such a big difference in my life when you did that for me. And it sort of brought me out of my shell. And even adults that I have worked with, I've been saying, okay, thank you for what you did for me. And a lot of times people don't realize the impacts they have had on your life. Because people can go through their whole lives and think, I haven't done anything for anyone, or what was my purpose, or not realizing what their purpose was until we help them to see it. Maybe that was your purpose. Maybe you were put here at that time to help Cheryl do A, B, and C. And that's what you did. But because I never acknowledged what they did, they weren't aware of it. So I found myself like really trying to acknowledge folks and letting them know how much I appreciate the things they had done for me. And I didn't want to be one of those folks that, you go to the funeral and you sit there and say, oh my gosh, she did this and she did that, but nobody knew about it. And she didn't hear it from you while she or he was still living. So I don't want that to happen. So that's one of the things I do. When we were talking about things that bother you or when you get stressed and what you do, I find myself, and I realized my mother did this with my dad. I remember when he used to go to work and things would not work well, and he would come home and he would be yelling about stuff, and my mother would say, okay, he's not yelling at me. He's yelling and he's upset with the situation he was in, but he couldn't vent on the job because it might cost him the job. But he knew when he vented here that I guess the unconditional love they had for each other, then that enabled him to do it, and for her to accept it knowing it's not me he's talking about. But this is the way he gets through. And I noticed for myself when things start to bother me, I just call my best friend and I just say, okay, hey, I just need your ear for a minute. And I don't even need you to really respond. I just need to get it out. Mm-hmm. And once it's out, hey, it's over with and it's done. So that makes me feel a lot better because I've released it, because I don't want to hold on to it. And the worst thing I think we can do is hold things in because it ends up becoming more than what it actually is. Because sometimes even when you vent out situations, you realize that was really silly that I got upset over that when you start hearing it out loud. So I find like venting really helps. And like I said, the person I vent to, she knows that, okay, like I said, she doesn't really have to respond. I mean, she can if she wants, but she knows I just need to get it out. And when it's out, it's done.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. And what I appreciate is that you asked for what you needed. And so you share it with your friend, like, I just need to get this out. You didn't need an opinion. You didn't need a solution. You just needed the opportunity to get it out.
Yeah. Now, I may need to have a session with you because I do have one fear that I'm having real difficulty with, and it's getting worse as I get older, is I have a real fear of steps now, which sounds crazy. But I find myself, anytime I want to do something, if I want to go someplace, I have to find out first, okay, are there steps involved? And how many steps are there? Because I don't know if this is part of the vertigo that I have or if it's part of the fear of heights I had as a kid that's now come back to me. I don't know what it is, but like I said, everything I do, I check first, okay, how many steps are involved, and is there an elevator or, and if there's a railing, if there's steps, if they don't have a railing, then I'm not going to bother to use them. And it's just, and I realize it's having a negative effect on me because, like I said, it limits now what I want to do or what I can do. So we might have to have a private session on that one.
Okay.
So I will definitely be giving you a call.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that sounds good. There's a lot to unpack there, so I think we could talk about that somewhere else. And I think the older you get, this fear of falling happens for many. You're not alone.
But you know what? It's not always just the fear of falling, because I've never fallen on steps.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that, I just find myself when I get to a certain height in the steps, it's just like, okay, I almost freeze. Like, I can't go up and I can't go down. So it's just, like I said, we'll talk another time about that, because I don't want to take up your time with that. Plus, like I said, it's, like you said, it's probably a whole lot to unpack there. So, like I said, we will get in contact with each other.
Okay, and even what you shared about about grandma, and so like when we think about, so when people, we have to always understand that like the closer you are to someone, you're more susceptible of experiencing the negative sides of them, and not to say that you should be dismissive of it in all times and spaces, but they have high levels of comfort with you. So like you said, like you can't go off at your job if you want to maintain your job, but you do need to let out some of those frustrations. And so, with our partners and people close to us, we have to have a conversation around that. What is that going to look like? What are the boundaries around that expression? But the person that's receiving it, it's so important that you have that filter of, this is not directed towards me. Because the other side of it is not everybody has that filter. And when someone comes home and they're blowing off the steam of the day, the person receiving, that conversation is like, all the things that I've done wrong. And they're internalizing it.
Right.
So it's important that there is a conversation around it to create a healthy boundary, but also a filter to say that this is not directed towards me. And I cannot solve this problem.
Okay, good. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Cheryl. Does anyone have any other questions or comments or concerns they want to discuss with Tiffany? It's your chance.
And so I do know, like, one thing that you shared earlier in the conversation about how our community impacts our mental health, and I think we could possibly talk about that, for a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
And so, like, one thing about my day job, well, you don't know, but I am a school counselor, and so I work in the city of Chester. And I find myself supporting more than my students, but their families as well, because just among, mental health is a new thing, I think, among Black people. Many Black people have believed that they weren't privileged to kind of understand what mental health is, like you just got to keep pushing. And so getting that mental health support wasn't always accessible or affordable. And so we often believe that we can manage all of these things by ourselves, and we should manage all of these life occurrences by ourselves. And so, that can be a challenge for a lot of people, because we're not superhuman. We are entitled to feel. We're entitled to feel weak. We're entitled to want to be supported. And that doesn't mean that we are lesser than, or that we don't have strength. We do have strength, obviously, but there should be opportunity for us to feel weak and gain support. But going to the city of Chester, Chester has no supermarket, not one. They have like small mini markets, but they don't have a supermarket within like their city ordinance. You have to travel outside. And so how does this impact their overall well-being? They're a designated food desert. Well, it doesn't allow families to purchase, quality food that would support mental wellness. Mm-hmm. And so, like, having simple things, like when we talk about just our emotional stability, water, having access to clean drinking water, which is also a challenge there presently, but just having access to water, staying hydrated. When you go into a corner store, are you more likely to buy a sugary beverage, or water. And so, like, are you staying hydrated to kind of address potential irritability? And there's a lot to go into those food choices, the access to fruits and vegetables. And so not all mini markets have fruits and vegetables.
You're right. Yeah.
And so, like, all of those things that can contribute to our mental and emotional well-being. And then we have to look at, just the criminal activity in our neighborhoods in Philadelphia all over. And so how that kind of desensitizes us, and we're all living with this we experience high levels of crime, whether, we're participating in it, we know someone who has been affected by it, or we see it on our devices. And so, like, we're almost addicted to trauma. And how are we responding to these traumas that we're watching or hearing about? And so, like, for me, just working with a wide range of people, there's a high level of anxiety due to this, the what ifs, because we're watching so many different things. Like, in my private practice, I work with parents who are limiting what their children have access to just because they're fearful of, that something's going to happen to them. They're going to be harmed, or, some criminal activity. And that's a real possibility. But, like, how much of a possibility? How much do we paralyze our growth and our children's growth to address some of these anxieties that happen based on where we live and how we live?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And some of what we go through, that fear that we go through, like you said, it's real. It's real, but I think a lot of times it has to do with we need to limit the information that we take in. Like, for myself, I don't watch local news. I live in the city of Philadelphia, and I could watch the local news every day like a lot of people do, and take in all of that negative news, because it's just really a bunch of bad news. It's rare that there's ever any good news. And if I took all that in, I may not ever leave my house, really, but I don't allow it. I don't allow myself to take that in. Occasionally I'll do a little check-in just to see what's going on, but on a daily basis, I don't take that in. And we have to really be careful what we consume in terms of news or what's on our phone. Even I notice when I open up my phone, I'm bombarded with news that I didn't even, I didn't solicit this news, but it's coming up on my phone automatically. I haven't figured out yet how to turn that off. And it's news about things that I don't care about. That all these things that we take in affects our mental health, and we really have to be important at night before we go to bed what we take in, and in the morning when we get up what we take in immediately. Because if you grab your phone first thing in the morning, you don't know what you're going to see. You don't know what kind of information that's going to be there that you can take in that's going to affect your well-being, really, your mood. You never know. It could be good, but it doesn't have to be. So we have to be really mindful of what we take in. Let's control the programming, because we're constantly being programmed everywhere we look, throughout our lives, throughout society, from many, many different sources. So it's really important that we take control. That's like really the focus of this podcast, is taking control of our own health, ourselves, not leaving it to be controlled. And one of the ways of doing that is really paying attention and controlling the information that you take in from all these many, many sources, which we never had 25 years ago. We're bombarded with news or information, and it's not always a good thing.
Right, and so controlling, that part is a definite strategy, to managing it, and also being mindful of how, our strategies impact one another. And so, like, if you've watched a lot of negative content, but you can't house it all, it's just too much for you to emotionally manage, so you vent that out to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how they choose to process and create a coping strategy for the trauma that you shared with them. And so it could be a ripple effect of it. And so we just need to be mindful of that, like the frequency of these things. I remember Dick Gregory said, like, a long time, you don't want to, like, allow these things. Once it controls you and it controls your emotion, then you're in a bad space. And so, like, things happen that impact our emotions, but we don't want to give something control over our emotional output at all times. So if you could create boundaries for that, that's really, really important for your emotional well-being.
Right. Okay, does anyone else have any questions, comments, anything else they want to share? Okay, well, Tiffany, you want to give us your contact information, let everyone know how they can reach you, if they want to contact you for services or share your information with someone else that may be able to use them.
Sure. So I am on 2 platforms. You can find me, Tiffany Thornton, on BetterHelp, which I'm sure you all are familiar with it. They have many, many commercials. BetterHelp is a mental health platform. I do not believe that they accept insurance unless it's an EAP, like an employee assistance program, but it's available, and you kind of set the terms and conditions of your usage. I'm also on Grow Therapy.
It's BetterHelp. It's BetterHelp.com?
BetterHelp.com. BetterHelp.com. And you can also find me on Grow Therapy, and that's just growtherapy.com. And on that platform, I accept Optum, Cigna, and momentarily will accept Highmark Blue Shield. So I do accept insurance on that platform. And you can also find me on my own website, Tiff the Therapist.
You want to spell that out?
TIFFTHERAPIST.co. My number is 484-463-7376.
You want to repeat your website and your number one more time, please?
TIFFTheTherapist.co. TIFFTHERAPIST.co. 484-463-7376.
Thank you so much for that. So again, I'll ask again if anyone has any questions, concerns, or comments. You can make them now before we close out. If not, we're going to end our bi-weekly podcast, and we thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I thank you, Tiffany, so much for taking your time to bring us this information that we all need about mental health. So let's take care, and I will hopefully have you back in this first week of December at the same time. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.